They had rebuilt the throne room, but it still remembered the fire. Light slanted through high, refitted windows in long bars of gold and white, stripping the room of shadows but not of ghosts. Where once the melted skeleton of 1,000 swords had twisted up like some dead thing's spine, there was only an empty dais of dark weirwood, smooth and unadorned. No throne, no knives, no crown resting on a velvet cushion. Sansa Stark stood on the lower steps, the weight of eyes pressing on her heavier than any circlet, and waited for the northern envoys to be announced. She felt sweat prick beneath the fine blue silk of her southern gown. It was a Reachman's color, the color of clear skies and pleasant summers, chosen because it soothed and reassured the southern lords. She wore a silver chain at her throat, the links shaped like tiny leaves, some for the oaks of the Reach, some for the golden roses of Highgarden, some for the rippling trout of Riverrun, one of pale weirwood for the dire wolf of Winterfell. No lions, no dragons. The herald thumped his staff. Ser Davos Seaworth, hand to his Grace John of House Stark, king in the north and the lands beyond the wall. Ser Alice Karstark, sworn sword. Maester Colin of Winterfell, the nobles lining the hall. Men from the Stormlands and Dorne, from the Reach and the Isles and Rivers, even a scattering from the Westerlands, shifted and murmured. Some had never forgiven the North for tearing itself away. Others had simply never seen its representatives at such close range. The great doors yawned. A drift of colder air slipped into the hall, tinged with the smell of horses and the faint, sharp bite of northern soap. Sansa watched them come. Davos walked with the solidness of a man who had spent his life on ships rather than in courts. His gray beard neatly trimmed, his black doublet modest, his smuggler's hands bearing old ink stains. Alice Karstark's long stride was almost a prowl, her hair cropped to her jaw, her sword worn with the ease of someone who had killed with it. Maester Colin's chain rattled quietly as he walked, every link gleaming dull against his plain robes. 3 where once the North might have sent 10. 3 where once they had knelt to the Iron Throne. There was no Iron Throne any longer. Sansa's fingers tightened on the carved weirwood rail of the dais before she forced them to relax. Her courtiers watched her more closely than they watched the envoys. Any flicker of softness, any crack in her composure, would be weighed and measured, discussed over wine in feather-bedded chambers, curled like a worm into the roots of rumor. Her face must be the South, she reminded herself. Calm, bright, sun-warmed. Not a girl from the snows of Winterfell. Rise, she said, because she realized they had already knelt. Her voice carried through the hall. There were no dragon skulls in the dark behind her, no iron swords fanning like wings, but the space itself magnified words, made them larger than they had any right to be. Davos got to his feet with a soft grunt. "Your Grace," he said, and his voice was as Sansa remembered it, rough as rope but honest. "King John sends greetings, and hopes that the sea winds blow gentle on your harbors this year." Polite, neutral, as they had agreed in their letters. She descended one step, no more. It brought her close enough to see the new lines etched beside Davos's eyes, the silver in Alice Karstark's hair that had not been there when she had ridden south with her banners to fight for Winterfell. "We thank his grace for his good wishes," Sansa replied, "and pray the snows lie kind on his roads, and his winters short." A ripple of amusement tugged the corners of a few southern mouths. To wish someone a short winter was to wish them an impossible blessing. But they all remembered, too keenly, the year when winter had almost devoured everything. Behind Sansa, Tyrion shifted his weight, the soft whisper of silk and leather marking his presence at her shoulder. He wore no chain of office either. No hand could be more visible than the crown that was not there, but everyone knew what he was. She did not look back at him. This had to be between her and Davos, between South and North. "Will you hear our business before your court, your grace?" Davos asked. "Or in more private company?" Sansa held his gaze. Davos had lied for kings before, she knew. Smugglers were practiced liars. But he had also told the truth when it mattered, when telling it had cost him dearly. She trusted him more than most of the men who bowed inside these walls. "My lords and ladies," she said to the hall, "you have other petitions to bring today. The matter between the North and the South is substantial and likely to tire us all. We will speak in council." A fresh murmur, relief on some faces, frustration on others. The Lord of Casterly Rock, some distant cousin of the old Lannisters, thin and sharp-eyed and perpetually displeased, looked as if he would have protested, but a glance from Tyrion cut him off at the root. Gendry Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, only scratched thoughtfully at his beard. "Very well," Sansa said. "We will hear the lesser matters now. Ser Davos, be welcome in King's Landing. When we are done for the day, you will join us in council chambers." Davos bowed again. "Our thanks, your grace." He stepped aside with Alice and the maester, taking their place along the wall. They watched the rest of the petitions unfold. Land disputes in the Reach, some complaint from the Dornish about tariffs, the Ironborn seeking permission to raid Myra's ships in revenge for some slight. All of it the familiar grind of rule. Through it all, Sansa's mind tugged north, like a wolf feeling the pull of the pack. Not Jon himself, not yet, but the thought of him, his signature, the careful way his letters never spoke of longing or regret, only of practical matters, trade, borders, the shared maintenance of Moat Cailin. They signed themselves with titles and names that no longer fit comfortably in her mouth. To Jon Snow, I was never anything but Sansa, she thought. To King Jon of the North, I must be your grace. Only when the hall had emptied and the sun had lowered on the western windows, painting the floor in blood orange and somber gold, did she rise. "Come," she said to Tyrion, "let's see what my brother wants." "They never come for nothing," Tyrion observed mildly as they walked the rebuilt corridors. "But perhaps this time one of them will surprise us." "If I am surprised by the North," Sansa said, "it will not be in a way I enjoy." He glanced up at her, searching her face. She kept it smooth. They turned into the small council chamber, where the map table still dominated the center of the room, a great slab of carved and painted wood showing Westeros from Dorne to the wall. Someone had carefully scratched a faint line just south of the neck. The door opened behind them. Davos entered first, then Alice, then Maester Colin. Servants brought wine and bread and a thin stew fragrant with garlic and onions. Sansa let them eat a little before she spoke. Men were more reasonable on full stomachs. Cersei had taught her that, though she would never admit it out loud. At last she set her cup down. "Very well, Ser Davos," she said. "Why am I not reading this in a letter?" Davos wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. His manners had improved, but only so far. "Because some words are better spoken where eyes can read more than ink," he answered. "And because there are some things a maester's raven ought not to carry." "Like what?" Tyrion asked, lounging in his chair. "Threats? Promises? Songs?" Davos's gaze flicked to the line on the map, the scar between north and south. "Peace," he said, "or the end of it." The fire crackled, sending a cascade of sparks up the chimney. For a moment Sansa heard only that, and the distant, muted clatter of armor as the guards changed in the corridor. "Explain," she said. "It's the Riverlands." Davos folded his rough hands on the table. "They're the wound that never healed. Your grace knows that as well as I. The trident's caught between you. The northern bannermen say the south taxes them twice for goods that pass east to west. The south says the northern men poach fish and timber and pay nothing. Lord Edmure tries, but he hasn't the men to patrol every ford and village. Bandits thrive, so do others with more banners than bandits tend to have." "Reavers?" Gendry asked from his place near the end of the table. He had accompanied Sansa, as the Stormland's opinion was needed whenever ships or coasts were mentioned. "Not Reavers, my lord." Davos shook his head. "A new company, men with no great lord to answer to. They call themselves the Brotherhood Triumphant. Say they're born from the old Brotherhood without banners, though I doubt that. They take tithes from both your folk and ours, then give it back to the small folk in bread and protection, after they've taken what they want." Tyrion snorted. A protection racket, then. I remember those from my youth. Disguised as justice, no less. How innovative. They're more than footpads, Davos said, undeterred. They've got half-trained knights among them, deserters from every army in the war. They've got a leader who calls himself the Robin King. Say he's got the blessing of the Lord of Light and the Seven both. He promises to make the Trident free from Crown and Wolf and Rose and all the rest. How many? Sansa asked. A few hundred swords, perhaps. Davos lifted one shoulder. Enough to make trouble. Not enough to stand against you separately or together. But they're good at slipping through cracks. And Jon sends you to ask that I help Lord Edmure put them down? Sansa's mouth curved faintly. I've already offered him my men more than once. He always declines. He is proud when pride is most inconvenient. It's bigger than that. Davos leaned forward. Your Grace, they're breeding hatred for both your crowns. They take northern lads in flight from the long winters, southern ones in flight from southern taxes. They tell them the same story up and down the river. Look at the south, rich and green, fat on your grain. Look at the north, hoarding its furs and timber, shutting its gates to you. They say, neither king cares for you, neither queen cares for you. Only we do. A kingdom of the middle, Tyrion murmured. Not the first to dream of that. It always ends badly. What does King Jon propose? Sansa asked. A joint host. Davos's words dropped into the quiet like stones. Half from the north, half from the south. Led by Lord Edmure. They sweep the Trident clean. They show the folk there that the old days of justice aren't gone forever. That their lords remember them. And in doing so, Tyrion said, they show the same folk that both crowns can work together. Pretty notion. Dangerous too. Dangerous. Davos's brows climbed. With respect, my lord, what's dangerous is letting the riverlands fester like an untreated wound. Your Grace must know what happens when men lose faith in their lords. We all know, Sansa said softly. We watched them flock to dragons. Everyone fell silent for a moment. Daenerys Targaryen was ash now, bones buried under stone, her name spoken only in half-whispers. But they all remembered the long-reaching shadow of her wings over this city. Tyrion tapped a finger on the painted river between the forks. A joint host, he mused, led by Lord Edmure, loyal. At least as loyal as any man with a memory like his. Which banner flies foremost, I wonder? The direwolf or the... What do you call yourself these days, your Grace, since you've done away with the swords? The South, Sansa said. I am Chu.
In of the South.
I need no ancient sigil beyond that. Convenient, Tyrion murmured. Sansa ignored him. She looked at Davos, then at the map, then back at Davos. You can tell Jon this from me. The South will not march under a northern king's command. Not again. If he wishes to be seen as my equal, he must treat with me as equal. A joint host I will consider. One led by the Riverlands themselves, with equal captains from both realms. But I will not have my men taking orders from any man but their own officers or myself. Davos's eyes crinkled. I expected nothing less, your Grace. And you should expect another thing as well. If we do this, if we march together, we must march together completely. No half measures. No hidden resentments. That means something more than a convenient alliance against bandits. She lifted her chin. It means treaty, trade. Borders fixed in ink that will not easily be washed away by the next rain. You're talking of making the split true, Gendry said slowly. We always struck it as I don't know, a wound that might yet close, if we let it bleed long enough. I am talking of stitching it shut, Sansa answered. The realm has lived in uncertainty too long. My lords speak of if the North returns, as if it might be tomorrow. The North speaks of if the South collapses under its own weight, as if that would absolve them of the choice they made. The Riverlands lie between, suffering for our hesitations. If we act together, we must accept what that action says. And what exactly do you think it says? Tyrion's mismatched eyes were very sharp. that we are two realms, not one, and that we mean to remain so. Sansa met his gaze. But allied, formal allies with oaths and signatures and set obligations. Not a half-remembered peace born from exhaustion and grief. Davos exhaled through his nose. You're asking Jon to close the door forever, Your Grace. I'm asking him to stop pretending it's still half open. Her throat felt dry. She picked up her cup, found it empty, set it down again. He chose the north. I chose the south. We did it to spare the realm the horror of cousins warring for a single throne. If we now keep the wound raw, we've accomplished nothing at all. Jon never wanted a throne, Davos said, almost sharply. And yet he wears a crown. Sansa's voice was iron under silk. Choice is not always about desire, Ser Davos. He made his and I made mine. It is time we honored them. Davos was silent for a long moment. Very well, he said at last. I'll carry him your words. But if he refuses, then we will handle the Riverlands separately, she said. And the Brotherhood Triumphant will grow fat on the space between us. And in a few years' time, some clever lad with a knack for speeches will declare himself king on the Trident. And then we will have 3 crowns and 3 realms, and a war that makes the last look like a childish squabble. Tyrion cleared his throat, breaking the heaviness. On the bright side, he said, we may at last test how many crowns Westeros can balance upon its head before they all tumble off. No one laughed. Sansa pushed back her chair. There is another way, she said. I will speak with Jon myself. Davos blinked. Your Grace, the border will hold, she said, even if I cross it. Moat Cailin belongs to neither of us exclusively, by the treaty we signed. It's the one place where North and South meet without either yielding more ground. If Jon still remembers my face as more than paint and jewels, he will meet me there. And if he won't? Tyrion asked. She smiled without humor. Then we know where we stand with my brother, don't we? When Davos left that evening, ravens already winged their way north with word of the proposed joint host. But another raven carried a different message, written in Sansa's own hand on the thinnest vellum, sealed not with the Great Seal of the South, but with a small, private stamp shaped like a direwolf. Jon, the Riverlands boil. Our people suffer between us. I will not permit it any longer. Meet me at Moat Cailin. Come as my brother, not my rival. Sansa. Jon received it in the solar of Winterfell, where the windows looked out over hard-packed snow and the breath fog of horses in the yard. He read it once, twice, then held it against the light of the brazier. Sansa's hand was as precise as ever, neat curls and steady straight lines. The letters tight as if afraid of spreading out too far. Moat Cailin, Tormund said, peering over his shoulder. The wildling leader's red beard was braided with bits of bone, his breath puffing in the chill air. What's that? Some southern stew? It's a ruin, Jon replied absently. Old fortress, controls the neck, hard to take, harder to hold. He thought of sodden earth and dripping moss, of towers collapsed inward like broken teeth, of the smell of the bog. He had first seen Moat Cailin from the south, marching north to what he'd thought was his home. Later he'd ridden past it in winter, its stones frosting over, a silent warning. Your sister wants to meet you in a ruin? Tormund scratched his head. Romantic. Not like that, Jon said, more sharply than he'd intended. Heat rose in his cheeks. She wants to speak. About the Brotherhood. Those river rats? Tormund shrugged. Send some men, chop their heads off, piss on their banners. Easy enough. It's not easy, Jon said. Nothing's easy when the line runs through men's hearts as much as through land. Tormund squinted at the parchment, as if he could wring more sense from it by force of will. She says come as a brother, not a rival, he read haltingly. Seems to me she thinks of you more as one than the other. That good enough for you? Jon's thumb ran over the pressed direwolf in the seal. It was almost identical to the one his father had once used. No, Eddard Stark had never been his father, but the habit of thought remained. Some scars lay too deep for truth to reach. She doesn't call herself my sister in her letters, he said. Oh, I. Tormund's grin showed a wolf's worth of teeth. Would you rather she wrote? To my brother Jon, who I love more than all the southern Poxy lords put together, come meet me in a swamp? He could almost hear Sansa's scandalized snort at that. Jon shook his head, but the corner of his mouth twitched. The South calls her your grace, he said. I call her Sansa when I write, but on the seals and such it's all very proper. I suppose she cannot afford to be more than proper. And you can? Tormund thumped him companionably on the back. You, King Jon Snow, wearisome bastard of the North. Jon looked at the letter again. The firelight caught a tiny smear at the end of her name, as if the pen had hesitated. She's right, he said. The Riverlands are suffering. If we keep acting like spoiled children on either side of a line, we'll lose everything we fought to save. He crossed to the window. Outside, the courtyard bustled. Men drilled with spears. Women carried buckets of slopping beer and steaming stew. Children chased each other, their laughter sharp in the cold air. Above it all, the direwolf banners flapped. They had died for those banners. So many of them. He closed his eyes briefly. I never wanted a crown. He remembered saying it to her on the windy battlements of Winterfell, snow whipping against their faces. She had laughed. Then, a short, bitter laugh that had not sounded like the girl who'd once dreamed of golden-haired princes. Nobody who deserves one ever does, she'd said. Now she was queen of half a continent, and he was king of the other half. He opened his eyes. Prepare riders, he told Tormund. We'll leave for Moat Cailin within the week. Within the week? Tormund scratched at his beard again. Not tomorrow? There are things to arrange. Jon rolled the letter carefully and slipped it into his belt. If I leave, the North must keep running. Warden of the Wall, Lord of Winterfell, the Free Folks Warband. They all need someone to watch them. And that someone's not you? Tormund tilted his head. Hells, Jon, you finally sit in a hall where when you say, do this, people actually do it. You can leave them a few days. Jon gave him a dry look. You weren't around when Arya decided to take a ship west of everything rather than marry into some house. My sisters have minds of their own. Aye. Tormund's grin softened. One went west to sail off the edge of the world. One went south to sit in a chamber full of spiders. And one's sending you letters like a maester. Maybe it's you who's trapped Snow. Jon said nothing. He turned back to the window, watching the smoke curl up from the chimneys into the iron-gray sky. In the end, he left Winterfell with fewer men than Davos would have preferred and more than Jon himself thought strictly wise. A small company of mounted guards, a handful of free folk trackers, and Ghost loping silent at his side. The white direwolf's fur blended with the snowbanks, his red eyes blinking slow and steady. They rode south along the King's Road, where once he had ridden north as a boy with a bastard's hopes and little else. The scenery had changed less than he had. The trees still loomed ancient and black on either side. The ground still rolled gently in places and rose abrupt in others. The mileposts still leaned drunkenly under their crust of ice. But the air smelled different now. Less of fear, more of smoke and wood and distant baking bread. The traces of war had been erased in some places, overgrown or rebuilt. In others, they stood as stark reminders. Burned-out farmsteads left as bone-white shells, mounds where mass graves bulged under snow. Men raised their hands as he passed, some in salute, some in simple human acknowledgement. Women curtsied or stared. Children whispered, "King in T-North," and nudged each other. He hated the way his shoulders straightened in answer, the way some part of him responded to their eyes. Duty was a cloak he had tried to cast off more than once, only to find it clinging tighter every time. At the neck, the air grew wetter, heavier. The snow turned to slush and then to mud. The trees huddled closer, draped in thick gray lichen. Ghost's white fur became streaked with brown. Moat Cailin reared up from the bog like a cluster of old bones. 3 towers still stood, black and pitted, their tops broken away. The walls between them drooped and crumbled. Fens spread around its base, wide and treacherous. Only a few causeways, narrow and half-swallowed by reeds, offered passage. North of the ruin, the land rose again, firmer. South of it, the bogs stretched on and on. Smoke rose from one of the towers. Jon's hand tightened on the reins. "She's here," he said. Tormund squinted. "Could be some mud-eater lighting a fire in an old pot, for all you know. Northerners watching the fens would have sent word if that were so," Jon said. "Besides, look at the banners." A wind gusted, flipping a pennant so they could see it. It was not the dire wolf of Stark, nor the three-headed dragon, nor the crowned stag or roaring lion. It was a simple device. A field divided, green on the bottom, blue on the top, with a small stylized sun rising out of the green. "The South," Jon said. "Her new sigil. Looks like some sort of fruit to me," Tormund remarked. There were northern banners as well, pinned to the battered stone on the northern side of the ruin. Edmure Tully's trout flickered over the middle tower. Men moved ant-like along the causeway, repairing a collapsed section. Jon's breath misted in front of his face. He felt suddenly very tired. "Stay with the men," he told Tormund. "I'll go ahead with Ghost." "Alone?" Tormund scoffed. "And let you trip over your own crown into some bog hole? I don't think so." "I'm not going to fall into a bog," Jon said, exasperated. "You fell on your arse in the snow enough times," Tormund said cheerfully. "Don't argue, Snow. You always get killed when I let you wander off." Jon shook his head, but he didn't truly protest. Tormund and Ghost fell in on either side of him as he rode onto the narrow, slick causeway that led to Moat Cailin. Up close, the ruin was even more miserable. The stones sweated moisture. Moss crawled up between them in thick, slippery pads. The great gate had rotted long ago. In its place, a makeshift palisade of sharpened logs had been erected, with a gap wide enough for a horse. Northern guards watched from the northern tower, their breath visible. Southern guards watched from the southern, their armor brighter, their cloaks less furred. For a moment, Jon felt as if he were riding directly into a throat, to be swallowed by a giant stone beast. Then she stepped out from the shadow of the archway, and the illusion collapsed. Sansa wore riding leathers under a cloak trimmed with pale brown fur, the hood pushed back. The leathers were patterned with small, almost invisible stitches in the shapes of leaves. Her hair was braided down her back in a practical plait. No jewels, no iron circlets. The only token of her rank was a simple chain at her throat, the same one she had worn in King's Landing, though Jon could not know that. For a heartbeat, she was every version of herself he had ever known at once. Little girl in a thick winter cloak, lady of Winterfell in dark velvet, smiling sister he'd barely seen growing up, wary ally on a battlefield of lies. Then the present asserted itself. "Sansa," he said. "Jon." Her voice was steady. "You came. You called." He dismounted. Ghost pressed against his leg, a silent, solid presence. Jon's hand found the thick fur at the base of his neck and buried itself there. Tormund swung down as well, muttering something uncomplimentary about mud. Sansa's eyes flicked to him in recognition, and something like amusement softened them. "Still alive," she said. "I'd almost begun to think the stories were exaggerations." "Nah." Tormund bared his teeth. "They leave out all the best parts." She laughed briefly. The sound warmed the damp air more than the fire stands. "Come inside," she said. "Lord Edmure's waiting. There's water dripping everywhere out here, and I'd rather our talk not be drowned in it." Moat Cailin's interior was a maze of makeshift repairs and old, waterlogged stone. Sansa led them up a narrow stair and into a hall that had been cleared of rubble. A fire burned in a shallow basin, its smoke channeled up through a rough hole in the ceiling. A few rugs had been spread on the floor. Trestle tables stood along one wall. Edmure Tully was there, wrapped in a plain wool cloak, his once handsome face more lined but his eyes still kind. He greeted Jon with the weary courtesy of a man who had seen too many winters and too many wars, then retreated into the background, leaving the center of the room to the siblings. They did not sit. It seemed wrong to assume comfort. "You look well," Jon said finally. It was inadequate, but it was true. There was a steadiness in Sansa he had not seen before. It sat on her like fur on a wolf. "I am, as well as anyone who spends her days listening to men argue about tariffs and titles," she said. "You look tired." "I am as tired as any man who spends his days keeping free folk from eating his bannerman's sheep," he replied. Her mouth quirked. "Then we are well matched." Silence stretched, not quite uncomfortable. The distant drip of water echoed in the tower. "Davos told you of the Brotherhood," she said at last. "He did. He told me you proposed a joint host if we agree to formal treaty." Jon looked at her. "You want to make the split permanent. You made it permanent when you called your banners and refused to kneel," Sansa said, not unkindly. "We only pretended otherwise because it hurt less to think we might one day undo it. I never meant to be your enemy. You are not my enemy." Her blue eyes were very clear. "That is exactly why this must be done carefully. If we leave things as they are, someone else will rise who has no such loyalty. Some lordling with dragon dreams, or some priest with flames in his eyes. He will point at the uncertainty between us and drive a wedge through it. Then we will truly be enemies, with no choice left at all. You think signing a treaty will stop people from dreaming of one realm?" Jon's voice was rough. "Of one crown. I think it will make it clear that dreaming of one crown means war." Her fingers twisted together, then stilled. "Better to know that now, before children are born thinking they have been cheated of something they never truly owned." He thought of all the children in Winterfell, scuffling in the yards, their faces smudged with soot and joy. Children who had never seen a dragon or a White Walker, who only knew of them from stories. Children who might grow into men and women haunted by an idea of a unified realm, like a song half remembered. "Do you want it?" he asked suddenly. "One crown?" The question surprised her. She blinked, lashes damp from the humid air. "I wanted it once," she said slowly. "When I was a girl, I wanted to be queen, to sit on a golden throne and have people admire my gowns. Later, I wanted the Iron Throne destroyed, because every time I looked at it, all I could see were enemies. Now I want my people to eat and sleep safely, and not wake to find that some lord's quarrel has burned their house. If one crown could give them that, I would reach for it. But I know too well that it cannot." Jon exhaled. "I never wanted any crown," he said. "But if I gave it up, if I told my people tomorrow that the North should kneel again to the South, do you know what would happen? They would tear me apart, or they would kneel in name and rebel in truth. They lost too much earning the right to call themselves free." "I know." Her voice was very soft. "They lost you once." He flinched before he could stop himself, hand tightening in Ghost's fur. The direwolf stirred. "You heard about that," he said. "I heard you died." She lifted her chin. "And that you came back." "I don't remember much." A lie of sorts. He remembered the knife, the cold, the darkness, the sharp, shocking return. He remembered wondering if he was a ghost inhabiting his own body. "You died because of a disagreement between North and South," Sansa said. "Between Night's Watch and wildlings, but it is all the same in the end. People die when we cannot accept each other's freedom." "That's not entirely." "Don't argue every metaphor, Jon." The hint of a smile curved her mouth. "You know what I mean." He ground his teeth, but he could not truly deny it. "Very well," he said. "You propose a treaty. What would it say?" "That we recognize each other's sovereignty," she said. "Formally, that the North is a free kingdom, as is the South. That we pledge mutual defense against threats from Essos, from the sea, from the far north, from within. That there will be open trade across the border, with agreed tariffs and safe conduct." "Open trade," Jon said dryly. "Tell that to Lord Serwyn, who already grumbles that southern merchants cheat his stewards. Then we write rules so clear even Lord Serwyn can't find a loophole." It was as if she were reciting a list she had already made in her head. We agree on measures for shared roads, shared fortresses like this one. We settle the matter of the riverlands. How? She hesitated. In truth, she said, there are 3 realms in all this, north, south, and middle. But I will not see Edmure saddled with a crown he never asked for simply because geography is unkind. The riverlands will bend whichever way offers them most security and least suffering. If we give them both, perhaps they will not feel the need to choose. You propose joint rule. Shared protection, at least. She looked to Edmure, who stirred uneasily. 2 overlords, each sworn to respect the riverland's own lord in his governance, but to come to his aid when danger comes. In return, he swears to both, pays a fair portion of his harvest to each. It will be messy, but better messy than bloody. Edmure cleared his throat. I am not young, your graces, he said, and my son is spirited. I would rather not leave him a realm baked into a single cake, only to find it torn apart again the moment someone hungrier comes along. Then you agree, Sansa said. He gave a weary little shrug. I agree that if the 2 of you can write a treaty that keeps both your lords from killing me, I will sign it. Tormund laughed. Truth speaker, this one. Jon rubbed a hand over his face. Very well, he said. I will sign if the terms are fair. I will put my name to something that says I do not seek your throne, and that the North will stand by the South against threats. But I will not sign anything that allows Southern lords to march north without my leave. And I will not allow priests of the Seven to try converting my people by force. We've had enough of burning gods. Done, Sansa said at once. And from my side, the South will not harbor men who call themselves kings in the North. If any claimant to your throne flees south, we will turn them back. We will not put bounties on your head or spread tales of your unfitness. We will treat your envoys as what they are, representatives of an equal realm, not rebellious subjects. Done, Jon echoed. They looked at each other across the smoky air. And the joint host? He asked. We will muster men from both sides of the neck, she said. They will meet here and march under the Riverland's command. The Robin King will answer for his thefts and murders, but we will give his men a choice. Die as traitors to peace, or live as common men under lords who have sworn to protect them. You think they'll listen? Some will. Enough, perhaps, to make a difference. He thought of the free folk, of the way some of them had insisted on fighting to the last rather than bend the knee, and others had knelt with gritted teeth. Humans were humans on either side of any wall. You are asking me to trust you, he said quietly. I am asking you to let our people trust us together, she corrected. Ghost patted around her, sniffed at her cloak, then licked her hand. She smiled, surprised, and scratched him behind the ear like she had when she was a little girl. I seem to have his approval, she said. He has good sense, Jon said. Sometimes more than I do. Then perhaps he should wear the crown, she said lightly. I tried that once, Jon said. He just ate it. She laughed again, and this time something in him eased. They spent the rest of the day and long into the night drafting the bones of the treaty. Sansa's maester and Jon's own scrawled on vellum until their fingers cramped. Tyrion, when he arrived with Davos the next morning, added biting commentary and a few crucial clauses neither sibling had thought of. Specify what happens if one of you dies without direct heirs, he insisted. You may think that can be sorted out later. I assure you it cannot. Men will invent heirs if they must. Much simpler to write it down now. Helpful, Sansa said, rolling her eyes. Also, specify the status of the Vale and the Iron Islands. He went on relentlessly. They'll find ways to wriggle out of this if you do not. The Vale will talk of old pacts. The Ironborn will talk of old ways. Smother both in ink before they can stir. Sansa invited a joint delegation from both to Moat Cailin to witness the signing. Yara Greyjoy arrived, hard-eyed and amused, twisted rope in her hair and a dagger at her belt. Lord Royce came for the Vale, his armor as heavy as his sense of duty. I like it, Yara said after they explained. 2 realms, and us raiding both when no one's looking. If you raid my coasts, Sansa said blandly. I will remind you that your people still need grain from the Reach. If you raid my coasts, Jon said, I will remind you that your last king thought himself unconquerable. The North remembers how that went. Yara grinned. Fair enough. I'll keep my raiders aiming east. Plenty of fat ships there, and fewer wolves and roses on the decks. Lord Royce frowned down at the parchment. The Vale is its own realm, he rumbled. We bent knee to the Iron Throne of Aegon of old. We did not bend knee to a North that has chosen to part from it, nor to a South that has shed the throne altogether. Sansa kept her temper in check. The Vale has always stood somewhat apart, she said. This treaty does not change that. If you wish to swear separate vows of friendship, to me, to Jon, to Edmure, so be it. But if any threat comes over your mountains, don't expect us to hurry through your narrow passes if you've spent the years before poking at our eyes. Royce's mouth twitched, almost a smile beneath that beard. You have your mother's steel, he said. She had more sense than steel, Sansa answered. I hope I inherited both. In the end, the Vale signed a separate compact, promising to defend its borders and send aid if either realm were invaded from across the Narrow Sea. The Iron Islands signed a similar one, tailored with enough wiggle room to satisfy Yara's need for mischief. It took a week to finish the writing and the arguing. In that time, Jon and Sansa fell into an old, strange rhythm. They breakfasted together on hard bread and cheese, then parted. He to speak with northern captains, she with southern lords. They met again over maps, over letters from their respective councils, over cups of small beer at the end of the day. Sometimes they spoke of policy. Sometimes, haltingly, they spoke of the past. Do you ever think of her? Sansa asked once, when the tower's shadows had lengthened and the men had retired, leaving only them and Tyrion snoring softly in a clutch of furs in the corner. The dwarf claimed he slept better near other people, so long as they were unlikely to stab him. Who? Jon asked. Daenerys. He stared into the fire. Flames licked the blackened stone. Yes, he said. I try not to. It doesn't help. I think of her too, Sansa said. Of the way she looked at me, as if she saw through me and yet not at all. I think I might have become her, if my life had twisted just a little differently. No, Jon said at once. You would not. Would I not? What if I had flown dragons instead of learning to sew daggers into my sleeves? What if I had been told my whole life that I was owed a kingdom? She shrugged. We are what the world makes us, Jon, and what we allow ourselves to become, yes. But the starting point matters. She chose to burn them. His jaw clenched. She made that choice. I know. Sansa soothed Ghost absently where he lay half-draped over her feet. I'm not excusing her, only understanding the path she walked. I walk mine looking backward, Jon said. I see every step that led to the fire. It doesn't change where I ended up. She studied him. Do you want to die? She asked abruptly. The question shocked him. He almost laughed, but something in her face stopped him. I did that once, he said. It wasn't as restful as they say. That's not an answer. No, he said slowly. I don't want to die. Not like that, not as some penance. If I die on some field because I had to be there, so be it. But I'm tired of the idea that I owe it to anyone to bleed. Good, she said simply. What about you? He asked. Do I want to die? She smiled crookedly. I used to think constantly of death. When Joffrey held my hand too tight, when Cersei smiled sweetly, when I hid from Ramsay's dogs, I used to plan little ways I might slip away. I don't anymore, not because I'm braver, because I'm too angry to give those years up now that I finally have them. They're yours, Jon said. You earned them. She nodded. Then let's not waste them, she said. Let's not spend the rest of our lives pretending we can undo what's been done. On the 9th day at Moat Cailin, they signed. They did it in the open courtyard under a gray sky. Rain misted down, fine and insistent. A makeshift dais had been thrown together from old planks. The parchment lay on a table, weighted at the corners with stones. Edmure stood by it, flanked by lords from both sides of the neck. Sansa signed first, her name flowing across the page. Sansa of House Stark, first of her name, Queen of the South. Jon signed second, Jon of House Stark, King in the North and the lands beyond the Wall. Edmure added his own, Edmure of House Tully, Lord of Riverrun and the Trident. Tyrion, as Hand of the South, and Davos, as Hand of the North, signed as witnesses, along with Royce and Yara and several others. When it was done, Sansa rolled the parchment and slid it into a waterproof tube. It would be copied in King's Landing and Winterfell, copies sent to every great lord, to be read aloud in halls and folded into chests. Sansa stepped forward. "Lords of the North," she called, voice ringing off the wet stone. "Lords of the South, men of the riverlands of vale and isles and mountains, hear these words and hold them as binding as any oath before gods. From this day forward, the realms of North and South stand apart, but not opposed. Each shall govern its own, answer to its own laws, swear by its own ways. But when enemies rise to burn what we have rebuilt, when foreign sails glare on our horizons or strange fires bloom in our forests, we will stand together." Jon's turn. "We didn't fight the dead so we could drown in the living's quarrels," he said. "We didn't lose brothers and sisters to walkers and dragons so some petty lord could gain another strip of land or another heap of gold. The North is free and so is the South. Freedom isn't worth much if it means only that we're free to kill each other. This treaty doesn't make us one people. It makes us neighbors. Let's be good ones." The men shouted then. Not the wild roar of war, but a rough, hoarse cheer. It rose up and mingled with the sound of the rain. Tormund elbowed him. "You talk pretty when you try," he said. "Shut up," Jon muttered, but he felt oddly lighter. The joint host mustered over the next weeks, banners sprouting along the causeways like bright, dangerous flowers. Northern men in furs, southern men in boiled leather. Riverland's levies who eyed both with suspicion. The Robin King, when they found him, was nothing like the monstrous figure rumor had painted. He was barely 30, thin and sharp-oared, with a patchy beard and bright, fervent eyes. His men were a ragged mix of boys and graybeards, deserters, outlaws. They dressed him in green and brown, a feathered cap on his head. "You call yourself king?" Edmure asked him when they had him bound on his knees in a muddy clearing. "I called myself what they needed," he said, staring up at Jon and Sansa with unblinking intensity. "They were hungry, they were unprotected. Lords like you took their tithes and gave them ashes. You left a space. I filled it. No one left that space on purpose," Sansa said. "We were rebuilding." "You were rebuilding your halls," he said. "Your walls, your pretty cities, not their lives." Jon's jaw tightened. "You stole," he said. "You killed. I took what they needed and I killed the ones who would have killed them." The Robin King's smile was bitter. "Look at them. Ask them if they regret it." Some of his men, under guard, watched from the edge of the clearing. Their faces were drawn, wary. One boy, maybe 15, met Sansa's eyes. She saw fear there, yes, but also a shadow of hope. "We will not execute men for starving," Sansa said quietly, "nor for wanting justice. The Robin King is another matter. A crown, even a feathered one, carries weight. I never," the man swallowed, "I never burned anyone in their beds. I never sacked a town. I only took tithes. You took the right to decide who lived and who died," Jon said. "That's a king's right. You sentenced men on your word alone. Theirs is no different," he spat. "Theirs just wear better silks. Our right," Sansa said, "is granted by the people we protect. When we fail them, they have the right to turn away from us. They had that right when they turned to you, but you failed them too in the end. You forgot that your crown was made of their trust." He sneered. "Pretty words from a girl playing at queen." "Heard that before," Jon said under his breath. Sansa didn't rise to the insult. "You will hang," she said simply. "Not because you dared to speak, but because you dared to rule without accountability. You will hang because you gathered men to your banner to fight both North and South. and in doing so, you would have torn this land apart." He laughed short and sharp, "As if it isn't already in pieces." "It is," she said, "but they'll be pieces we chose." They executed him at dawn, with both northern and southern men watching. The Robin King died quickly, his eyes fixed on some point beyond them. Afterward, Sansa met Jon's gaze above the trampled grass. "We could have made an example," he said. "It might have been better to show mercy." "That was mercy," she said. "The next man like him will see that we are willing to hang men who take crowns without consent. But he will also see that we did not slaughter his followers. We gave them a choice. Most took it. Many of the Brotherhood's men had accepted the offer. Lay down arms, accept a royal pardon, return to their villages or join lordly levies. A few had refused and been imprisoned. A very few had tried to flee and died in the attempt. What do you think he saw at the end?" Jon asked, glancing at the swaying body. "Nothing," Sansa said. "Or something. Does it matter?" "It does," he said quietly. "To me." She looked at him, and for a moment she saw not the king but the man who had plunged a knife into the woman he loved because he believed the world depended on it. "It doesn't end with fire," she said more gently. "Whatever he saw or didn't see, ours doesn't end with fire." "Yours doesn't," he said. "Mine already did. Then you're living on borrowed days." She touched his arm. "Let's not waste them either." They rode back to Moat Cailin together. The joint host began to thin, northern men heading north, southerners south, Riverland's levies drifting back to their flooded fields and patched roofs. The space between north and south, for a little while, felt less like a wound and more like a scar, still tender but no longer bleeding. On their last night in the ruin, Jon and Sansa climbed the highest intact tower. The wind was strong there, ragged clouds scudding across the sky. The stars winked in and out of view. "You should come south," Sansa said suddenly. "Not to kneel, just to visit, see what it's become. It's not the city you left. The people, they've begun to breathe again. They say your name with something other than fear or scorn." "I thought they mostly spat at it," Jon said bleakly. "Some do," she admitted. "Some say you were a fool to do what you did. Some say you were a hero. Most simply say it. Like weather. Jon Snow killed the Dragon Queen, and then the snows melted, and then we rebuilt. As if your actions were both monumental and mundane." He huffed a laugh. "I don't know if that's better or worse. It's life," she said. "They have to live it. And you," she looked south. In the distance, through the scudding clouds, a faint glow marked the direction of King's Landing, though they were too far to see it truly. It was more memory than sight. "I never meant to rule," she said. "I meant to survive long enough to be able to choose something, anything. Rule chose me instead. I've made my peace with that." "Liar," he said softly. She smiled. "Half peace, then," she conceded. "The rest is fear." "Of what?" "Of making the wrong choice." She hugged her cloak tighter. "Of leading them into another war. Of becoming what I hated." "You won't," he said. "You've seen what that looks like. You won't walk that path." "I hope you're right." Her breath misted. "Promise me something, Jon. If I can. If I begin to lose myself," she said. "If I begin to talk of fire and blood and iron. If I begin to see my people as pieces on a board more than as lives. Tell me. Remind me, even if I don't want to hear it." He frowned. "You have Tyrion, Davos, they'll—" "I need my brother," she said. "They are my counselors. They are valuable. But they did not watch me grow up. They did not see what I was before all this. You did." "Not very often," he said wryly. "I was busy brooding in corners." "You saw enough," she said. "Promise me." He hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." "And you?" she asked. "What do you need?" "Less responsibility," he said. "But that ship has sailed." "Whose fault is that?" she teased, but gently. "Yours partially," he said. "You called me back from the dead with your letters." "If I had that power," she said, "I would." She bit the sentence off, but he knew how it would have ended. He would have seen the names in her eyes even if he didn't know them. Father, mother, Robb, Bran, Rickon, Arya, though that loss was different, chosen. Sometimes I forget they're dead, he said. I dream of them. I wake up and expect to see Robb polishing a sword, Arya swearing, Bran reading, Rickon hiding under the table. I wonder if that will ever stop. I hope not, she said softly. They stood in silence for a while, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Ghost pressed against Jon's leg, a white shadow. Below, men's voices drifted up faintly, laughter and argument. Do you think Father would approve? Jon asked. Of this, he gestured vaguely. The tower, the treaty, the separate realms. Sansa's smile was small, sad. I think he would be appalled, she said. At first, at the broken realm, at the idea of North and South as equals rather than lord and subject. At the thought of me sitting in the place Cersei once sat. But then he would look around him. He would see that people were living, not dying. He would see that children were growing up with full bellies and no soldiers camped in their halls. He would grumble. He would demand to know why we hadn't thought of a better way. And then he would bend. Eventually. He always did, Jon said. Quietly. She nodded. Quietly, she agreed. Dawn rose gray and pale. They parted at the foot of the tower. You'll write, she said. I'm not much for words, he said. But I'll try. You did well enough on the treaty, she said. I'll send you a maester to help, if you like. He rolled his eyes. Don't, he said. I've enough men telling me what I ought to write as it is. She laughed. He watched her mount her horse, watched the southern banners ripple as her party turned toward the far-off line where the bogs gave way to drier land. He watched until the last gleam of color vanished around a bend. Tormund came up beside him. You let her go without a hug, the wildling observed, scandalized. What sort of brother are you? The sort who knows she'd stab me if I did that in front of her lords, Jon said dryly. She might stab you, Tormund conceded, but she'd cry after. Women, complicated creatures. Jon smiled, a little. So are men, he said. Not me, Tormund said cheerfully. I piss on things I don't like and laugh at the rest. Simple. They rode north. In the years that followed, people would mark the signing at Moat Cailin as the day Westeros finally stopped being one kingdom and accepted being two. Songs would be written of the dividing, some mournful, some triumphant. Children in Winterfell would play at King in the north and Queen in the south, taking turns commanding their friends to charge at imaginary dragons. Children in King's Landing would toss stones across lines scratched in the dust and argue about tariffs in high, imitative voices. But for Sansa and Jon, it was not a grand moment so much as a series of small ones. Letters exchanged with increasing ease, joint patrols established along the border, a southern shipment of grain diverted north during a bad harvest without quibbling over payment, northern timber sent south when a storm tore down half the masts in the royal fleet. There were rankers, too, a southern lord who refused to pay northern customs, a northern captain who seized a southern merchant ship he claimed had strayed too far up the white knife, priests who preached that the division of the realm was blasphemy, free folk who muttered that they'd traded one set of southern chains for another of quill and parchment. They weathered each one at a time with curses and negotiations and, sometimes, the quiet application of steel. More threats came and went. A small colosar tried to land on the eastern shore, only to find a united fleet of north and south waiting for them, arrows darkening the sky. A pretender rose in the reek, claiming to be the bastard son of Gendry's father, but his rebellion sputtered when neither realm gave him support. Pirates clustered in the stepstones. They were swept away in a joint campaign led by Yara and a newly rebuilt royal fleet. Through it all, Sansa ruled the south with a hand that was alternately velvet and iron. She learned to use the faith rather than be used by it, to balance rich reachmen against hungry stormlanders, to give Dorne enough independence to keep their pride while ensuring their spears pointed outward rather than in. She married, eventually, not for love but for stability, a second son of a Reach house chosen for his mild temper and lack of ambition. They had children who grew up with sand under their nails and red in their cheeks, who knew as many songs of the North as of the South because their mother insisted the bards learn both. Jon ruled the North with reluctance that mellowed over time into a sort of stubborn contentment. He spent as much time at the Wall as at Winterfell, ensuring the Night's Watch did not fade into irrelevance and that the Black brothers remembered their duty even when the dead no longer walked. He hunted with the free folk, negotiated with proud northern lords, sat at feasts where people clapped him on the back and called him king in voices that held no resentment, only rough affection. They saw each other rarely in flesh. Once every few years, they arranged to meet at Moat Cailin or at White Harbor, or once, at a small, carefully guarded inn on the outskirts of King's Landing. Each time, the sight of the other struck them with a jolt, as if they had both somehow expected the other to remain forever as they had last seen them. "You've gone gray," she said once, fingers brushing his hair. "You've gone dangerous," he replied, nodding at the way southern lords hovered around her like anxious bees. They talked of their children, their counsels, their worries. They recounted small absurdities. Tormund's habit of hanging sausages from the antlers of Winterfell stags. Tyrion's bet with Bronn that he could go a month without drinking and the resulting disaster. They argued about the right way to calculate tariffs on spices. They did not speak often of the years before the split. When they did, it was in fragments, like turning over stones in a garden to see what had grown beneath. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him once, when they sat under the bare branches of a weirwood transplanted to a small courtyard in King's Landing. It was young, its bark not yet fully white, its face still being carved by a northern mason she'd brought south at great expense. "Regret what?" he asked. "Not taking the crown," she said. "The one crown you could have, after the fires, after the ashes. People loved you enough to make you anything." "Loved is not the word I would choose," he said. "Feared, perhaps, pitied, wanted to use. But yes, perhaps I could have. I would have ruined them all within a year. Or ruined myself." "You might have done better than I," she said. "I doubt that," he replied honestly. "You were always better at people. I was always better at stabbing things." "High praise," she said dryly. "And you?" he asked. "Do you regret letting the North go?" She looked up at the half-carved face in the tree. "Sometimes," she admitted. "When I am exhausted and some southern lord is whining about a border 3 inches on a map. I think of Winterfell and I ache. I wonder what it would be to ride through your gates and lay down the crown and say, 'It's yours now. You deal with it.' You'd last a week," he said. "Then you'd start telling me how to do it better." "Probably," she said, smiling. "But I do not regret the peace. Not truly. The shape of the realm is different now. That cannot be undone." "Nothing can be undone," he said. "Only done differently from here." She nodded. "Then let's keep doing it differently," she said. "Until the songs they sing of us are too complex to fit neatly into any one verse. Until they're bored of us," he said, "and sing of someone else. Preferably someone quiet and unambitious," she said, "who spends their reign building roads and dikes and never starting wars." "Sounds better than us already," he said. They sat together in the dappled light, a queen of the south and a king of the north, siblings in a realm permanently split yet stubbornly, improbably at peace. Above them, the weirwood's new leaves stirred, pale as infants' hands. The face slowly forming in its bark seemed to watch, eyes half-carved, mouth not yet set in any expression at all, as if the old gods themselves had not quite decided what to make of this divided, mended world.